There's something I just don't understand about Takeshi no Sengoku Unji. And that is, after making Takeshi no Chosenjo, why would Taito make another game based on Takeshi Kitano? Apparently, he's just a face in this one and had no input on it. So this isn't a completely broken, unplayable mess. But I also don't think it's actually good. Takeshi no Sengoku Unji is a really weird mix, and the consequence of that I think makes it less than the sum of its parts. First things first, this game is technically not based on anything except for Takeshi Kitano himself. There's some parts of it that are very similar to Fun Takeshi Jo, the television series that became Most Extreme Challenge elsewhere in the world. But the rights to make Famicom games based on Fun Takeshi Jo is owned by Bandai. In fact, they release a second game based on the show just a few weeks after this. So it seems like Taito wanted to make a game that's similar to, but legally distinct from those. The real meat of Takeshi no Sengoku Unji is the board game. They're all played on the same board, and they're all roll and move games where generally on your turn you roll a die, move that many spaces, and then do what it says there. However, there's 5 different game modes, each with distinct goals. In the Cross Japan game, you start at the north end of Hokkaido, and your goal is to reach Takeshi on the south end of Kyushu. Once you get there, you're forced to play a mini-game where you have to get a hole-in-one, and if you fail to do so, you're sent back to the midpoint. In Find a Master, all the players are Ronin who are competing to get a lord. First you have to go meet Takeshi and get a letter of introduction from him. Then you have to start working your way into the good graces of one of the feudal lords by demonstrating your skill as a samurai and bribery. First player to get a master wins. The Daimyo game picks up where that game leaves off. In fact, you can continue right from the previous game. There, your goal is to replace the daimyo you're working for. You'll have to build up your skill, and either work your way into the good graces of a lord, or challenge them directly to replace them. If you challenge your lord and fail though, you're kicked all the way back down to Ronin and have to play that version of the game, catching up with the other players. When someone wins the daimyo game, they can choose to continue on to the unification game, or someone could start from that mode, because you don't have to play through all the modes in series. There, all the players are daimyos and trying to conquer all of Japan. For some reason, conquering Japan mainly consists of going around to shrines and praying. And yes, you can get knocked all the way back down to Ronin while you play this mode. Finally, there's the merchant game, where the only goal is money. First player to earn a certain amount wins. There's no AI in the board game modes. You have to play with at least 2 players, though the game supports up to 4 players on the board game. On your turn, you have the choice of rolling a die or playing a card. You pick up cards at various points and you don't know what they do until you play them. And if you roll the die, it's a 7-sided die. You've got the numbers 1 to 6, and you've got Takeshi's face. If you get Takeshi's face, you can pick out any number 1 to 6, or you can pick 7. No, I don't know why they don't just let you pick the numbers 1 to 7. Or you can move the other player. You have to move your full movement unless you cross certain special squares, and those special squares are always bad, like crossing a river. So if you have to get to a specific castle, or want to visit a town, or need to reach a ferry, you have to roll exactly to land on it. On the Cross Japan game, that was especially bad when I had one player who got on the ferry immediately, and the other who spent about 8 turns going back and forth over that space. When you get to town, you can work odd jobs, recover some energy, gamble, or go to a swordsmith, while other big squares tend to be special minigames. There are 7 distinct minigames. A few of them get repeated with different graphics. There's the golf game where there's no aiming, it's just hitting the button when the meter's in the correct place. The river crossing where you have to hit left or right and hit A to jump. There's fish that will jump out of the water at you, and one of the stones is fake. This is very similar to a game from Fun Takeshi Jo. Also similar to a game from the show is when you storm the castle by choosing between one of 3 doors. One of the doors is fake and you'll just run into it. There's a lot of randomness in these minigames, and it doesn't really work for the best. There's also a variation on Space Invaders, where you have to shoot out either soldiers or yokai. You might have to cross a battlefield dodging shots. And there's this minigame where you mash the A button as hard as you can to run, and when you meet the person running from the other direction, you have to beat them in rock, paper, scissors. The loser of that goes back to their start. Finally, there's the one-on-one combat. There are some AI opponents for this, but you could also land on another player and duel them for their money. Here, you might have to do rock, paper, scissors, or you might have to sword fight. What you're doing is randomly decided every time somebody loses a health point. All of those minigames can be played outside of the board game by selecting Party Game at the main menu. As minigames go, they're not bad. They're also not good, but the whole point is to give players a brief skill challenge for a few seconds. But they also reflect the problems with the broader game. It's just too random. This is something we're going to see with a lot of these Famicom board games. In the end, it's a time filler with no meaning. People just keep rolling until someone wins. There is some strategy, but it's very minimal. This is a common problem when people who don't play board games design board games. And it's mostly gone away now thanks to actually good board games becoming the norm. But there has to be more to a board game than just random chance. And that's really all that Takeshi no Sengoku Unji has. But even as you roll around missing the one space that you need to get to in order to continue to play, it's still not as infuriating as Takeshi no Chosenjo.